Hello, and welcome to Dugout Debrief. I'm your host, Chris Deluca. This is Boom Broadcasting's one, first, and only baseball-centric podcast, and we are back here in the month of September. We are getting closer and closer to the month of October, closer and closer to postseason baseball. We have teams that are playing at a very competitive level. We're going to be talking about a team that is not playing at a competitive level for our main topic of the day in the New York Mets. We're going to be discussing if they're even going to be getting into the playoffs. We have had a team clinch a division. We have had two teams clinch wild card spots guaranteed, and probably one will clinch a division here very soon, more than likely within 24 hours of this episode dropping. But with that being said, we're going to be going to a guy who is in an incredibly competitive division and who is involved in an incredibly competitive MVP candidacy right now. Cal Raleigh is making history with 56 home runs. He passes Mickey Mantle at 54 home runs, for the most home runs in a single season by a switch hitter. He also passed Ken Griffey Jr. for the most home runs in a Mariners single season, which is very impressive. Ken Griffey Jr. being one of the GOATs of the Seattle Mariners. But as I've said, we've already had this conversation, and interestingly enough, we had this discussion on Sideline Savants, Jason and I, even though it's a football show, and we were closing that show that dropped on Wednesday at noon. Make sure to check that out. We discussed the MVP, and I think the National League is beyond a doubt solved. The American League is a lot closer. Objectively, if I was a voter personally, I would vote for Cal Raleigh because he is hitting more than likely. He's going to hit 60-plus home runs in a Mariners uniform, doing it as a catcher, doing it, being a major part of a team that, yes, has a lot of pieces, not as many as New York, but is doing a lot what they need to do. And doing it at a position where he's getting beat up really, really badly. So I would personally vote for him. The only issue is that Aaron Judge objectively is better offensively. He's leading in most offensive statistical categories. He's leading not just the American League, but also the National League as well. So give me Aaron Judge still, who's going to win it. But if I was to vote, I got Cal Raleigh. Moving on to a player also in this incredibly competitive division, a guy who is also a very, very great home run hitter, just having a not so great year injury-wise. And unfortunately, it just got even worse for the guys in Space City because they just lost Yordan Alvarez for significant time, manager Joe Espada says. He was trying to avoid a tag at home plate, and it ended up being a non-contact injury against the Texas Rangers, which is never something that we like to see. Even though he's not in the field very much, he is still going to be out a significant amount of time. And again, Yordan struggling, missing about 60 to 80% of this entire year. Not something that you want to see at all as an Astros fan, not something you want to see in general as a baseball fan. While you may have your opinions on the Astros, I certainly do, the whole sign stealing scandal and everything. They're still a very competitive team, a competitive dynasty, and losing Yordan Alvarez, especially with how much they've been struggling, that does say a lot. That is a huge player to lose at the worst possible time you can lose him. So we hope Yordan Alvarez heals quickly. And with that being said, we're going to be moving on to the first team to clinch a division title of 2025. It is the Philadelphia Phillies. They clinch a relatively weak National League East, not as weak as we thought it would be. The Miami Marlins are in third place, and they're well under 500. The New York Mets will be the headline of today's program, are absolutely struggling. But the Philadelphia Phillies dominating the Dodgers in Los Angeles here in the midweek series. The last West Coast trip for the Philadelphia Phillies. We'll be talking about the second leg of this West Coast trip here when our series of the week, when they go to Phoenix, when the Phillies go to Phoenix, go play the Diamondbacks, former National League champions here over the past couple of years, but defeated the Dodgers in game one of the 3-game series to clinch. Mets have fallen way back to a point where they may even miss the playoffs, which, like I said, we'll be talking about that. That's the highlight of the show. But guys, it is just crazy how far ahead Philly was this year. And like, the big question is, and I want to put this too, just put this out there in general, is are they the team to beat, or is it Seattle? Is it still Milwaukee? Milwaukee has not had anyone nipping at the heels the entire year. So the Phillies really looking like that team to beat, and especially if they can get Trey Turner back before the end of the year, that is really big. Even though they lost Zach Wheeler, that pitching rotation has not missed a beat, with Ranger Suarez, Christopher Sanchez looking really, really good against a strong Dodger team. But yeah, just very, very, very interesting times. Are the Phillies the team to beat? Put that in the comments. I'm interested to see y'all's opinion. Moving on, Brewers, business as usual. Brewers clinch a playoff spot, but still need a little bit more work to win that National League Central. They're done with the Cubs for the year, and I still think they're going to win that division. But Milwaukee clinching, they've played kind of lukewarm baseball here recently. They're still very, very good, but they've just kind of played not so great here over the past couple weeks. Not as good as we're used to, not Brewer baseball that we've seen. We know that we love Pat Murphy-led clubs here on Dugout Debrief, and I'll continue to. Love Pat Murphy-led clubs, but congratulations to Brewers on clinching a playoff spot. And also congratulations to the Chicago Cubs, who clinch a playoff spot in their rivals' ballpark in Pittsburgh PNC Park, clinching their first playoff spot since 2020. Before that was 2018, which was still kind of those 2016, World Series generational teams. There's still a chance for the division, but it's very, very unlikely. I think the Brewers have a substantial enough of a lead. They're 4.5 games back of Milwaukee with the Mets, Reds, and Cardinals left. I mean, you have two division teams that one is contending for a playoff spot and the other would love to play spoiler, and both of them honestly would love to play spoiler. And of course, the New York Mets were going to be fighting for their playoff lives. Cubs, I think that they're still going to be a comfortable wild card team as they've already clinched, but I do not see them being able to come back and win that division. Just too much distance here with only 3 series left in this 2025 MLB regular season. And moving on to our final piece of news, the Dodgers bullpen absolutely atrocious against the Philadelphia Phillies in Los Angeles. They perform historically bad. Ohtani throws 5 no-hit innings and immediately given up by Jacob Wolofsky. And the 6, 5 earned in 6 in a 6-run inning. Tanner Scott has continued to struggle to a point where I just do not even want to see him on a playoff roster. This is not a guy that I think is ready for the playoffs. I think that he needs to be really a lot of work done with him. He needs to be sent down, but honestly, it's just too late in the year to do that. You can't really do that in the month of September. That's why I think they should have done this back in like July, because he was bad even then. He was injured for a large portion of the year. I think that 2025 Tanner Scott is probably one of the worst relieving seasons I've seen for the Dodgers in quite some time, probably since the Phil Bickford days. So just that game 2 against the Phillies was a symbolic gesture of just how horrible the Dodger bullpen has been. Dave Roberts did not hold back. I definitely understand why Dave Roberts pulled Shohei Ohtani after 5, but still, these are must-win games. And as I said last week, talking about that Pirates series, where he kept in Blake Snell much too long. It's like you need to win these games, and they're just satisfied with losing, because you could have technically swept the Phillies and only been a game and a half behind the number 1 seed, behind the number 2 seed, behind a bye game, but it's not looking good. Weirdly, the bats are there, but the bullpen is just historically bad. The bullpen continues to be just historically bad. And we had seen a similar issue last year. Time will tell. And I think that's really the only thing that you can say with the Dodgers is that, the fate of the 3rd seed looks locked. I don't think that we're going to get a 2 seed like we did last year. But playing the extra series, it looks like we either play the Mets, who are really struggling, or the Diamondbacks, if they can come back, or if San Diego doesn't catch us, it might be even worse. So it really kind of varies who we might end up playing. We might end up even playing a team like the Chicago Cubs, which would not be a team that I would want to see in the month of October. I like us against the Mets still. I like us against the Diamondbacks, but Phillies are proving that they're a better team so far in the regular season. But, sometimes narratives don't mean that much. But the big thing I'm worried about is, regardless, we're probably going to be in a 3-game series here. Anything can happen in a 3-game series. So it would be a very big disappointment if we get swept or just, drop 2 out of 3. So we'll see. Time will tell. But that 3rd seed is looking like that's what we're going to get. And it looks like that 2 seed is completely out of reach because that bullpen just performed horribly. And that's what I said we should have invested in. And we did not. We did invest in some senses with guys like Tanner Scott, but still, it's just not looking good. It's not looking good at all for the Dodgers. But hey, like I said, this is what happened last year. Hopefully it can be a repeat of last year by the end result. Moving on to the New York Mets, and that's going to be kind of our main topic of the day, which, won't be the longest, but they are 2-8 over the last 10. And they have some really, really bad losses here. They have a series loss to the Texas Rangers. They were swept by the Philadelphia Phillies. They have a series loss to the team that's nipping at their heels in the Cincinnati Reds. And then they lost a series to the Miami Marlins, who are behind them, but still, having a better year than we expected, but are still in third place. And it's weird. You can't be performing like this against division rivals, against teams that are trying to catch up to you, against a former World Series champion, and getting swept by the team in front of you. It's just showing that you're not ready to compete in October. Alarm bells are going off if you're David Stearns, honestly. I mean, you spent all this money in the offseason on Juan Soto and re-signing Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso's having a great year. And still just, barely able to even scoot into October. It's looking like you may be going down to game 162 to be able to get in. And that is not what you were expecting if you're a Mets fan going in to the season. If you're telling the Mets that they're going to be going down to game 162 just to make it, you'd be thinking they'd be going down to 162 to get the division from Philly or Atlanta. But no, there's a good chance that Cincinnati or Arizona might pass them for a third wild card spot, for the last spot. So not looking good at all. But, the big advantage that I will say for the New York Mets is that the Diamondbacks have the Phillies, Dodgers, and Padres left. The Diamondbacks have the hardest, last three series of the year. While the Reds have the Cubs, Pirates, and Brewers. I think New York still is very, very much in contention for it, but it's really going to depend on what other teams do, which is never what you want to have. Even though they're still somewhat in the driver's seat, the results of what the Reds and Diamondbacks are able to do, if Diamondbacks are able to pull off a couple upsets, if the Reds, who are playing a Cubs team that's still fighting to try and catch up and, pass the Brewers in that division, a Pirates team that's out of it but would love to play spoiler as a division rival, or a Brewers team that's trying to formally clinch the division and clinch the number 1 seed, because they're going to be fighting with Philadelphia for that 1 seed. Everybody wants that 1 seed in the National League. So definitely a lot to play for every team. And obviously, Phillies have something to play for. Dodgers have a lot to play for. The Padres have a lot to play for. A lot of teams that are very, very good but playing lukewarm baseball left on the docket for the teams, the scoreboard that they will be watching. The Mets will be watching the out-of-town scoreboard. And the Mets themselves, they have the Nationals, the Cubs, and the Marlins left. And the Nationals and Marlins better be the ones that you're really, should be winnable. Those should be sweeps for them. They need it. I think that out of these 3 last remaining National League wildcard teams for that 3 seed, I definitely think the Mets have the most favorable advantage. But again, we've talked about the suspect of their pitching rotation. That's been the big thing, led by David Peterson. Sean Manaea has not looked good to the point where they have had to basically move him to the bullpen. Frankie Montas, they moved to the bullpen, then he went down. Just not what you want to see here. And the bats, yes, they've been there, but not to the extent that they were hoping. Francisco Lindor continued to have a great year, not the MVP level year that he had last year, 4.7 WAR this year. But again, the big thing I just want to highlight: Peterson, Clay Holmes, Senga, they moved down. Taylor Miguel, Manaea, they moved. They don't even have a 1-2-3, and that's the thing that really concerns me about the Mets. The bats are still there. Pete Alonso having a great year. And Francisco Lindor having a great year. All that, Juan Soto continue to have a great year, but still, the bats can only do so much, and still they're not playing to this insane elite level. So I think the Mets get in simply because they're in the most favorable out-of-town scoreboard watcher situation. They have the most favorable schedule to put that in more simple terms, but it's not looking good. It is just not looking great. They are reminding me so much of the 2024 Atlanta Braves, who were barely squeaking in over the Arizona Diamondbacks, who are the reigning National League champions. A lot of people have rather seen Arizona in, but Atlanta snuck in just banged up to all the end. And then they got absolutely embarrassed. And I think that's what's going to happen to the New York Mets, especially if into playing a Padres team or a Dodgers team. I could definitely see the New York Mets going 2 and out. And then, again, they're giving me a lot of 2024 Atlanta Braves vibes. Moving on to our power rankings here, and we had some pretty seismic shifts here. We have the Chicago Cubs, who we've talked about clinching a wild card spot, guaranteed, still in contention, but very unlikely for the National League Central. We have the Milwaukee Brewers, who have played very, very good baseball over the years, or sorry, over the year, more lukewarm recently. The Toronto Blue Jays, who have looked really, really good. I think that they're in the driver's seat for that. Definitely for the American League East, which has been a lot more competitive than we expected, simply because it's 3 teams as opposed to like 2.5 we were expecting to compete. The Tigers are missing here because they've not been playing the best baseball. I do 100% think that the Tigers are a contender in the American League, but by a mile, the Blue Jays are probably going to end up with the number 1 seed. Philadelphia Phillies, we've already talked about them. In my opinion, they're the team to beat in the National League. And then number 1, who are 10-0 over the last 10, we have the Seattle Mariners. The Seattle Mariners are at number 1 here. They have been playing incredibly hot baseball with their historic setting catcher led by a great pitching rotation with Castillo, Kirby, and Brian Wu. I really like the Mariners. But overall, guys, the big thing I do want to highlight here, and I'm going to be talking about this next week as well, is that I just don't think there is anyone here that we absolutely think is by a mile going to win in one league or the other. By a mile is going to win the World Series. In years past, we've had teams that are winning 110 games, and you look at them like, this team's going to make it. This team's at least going to make the World Series. Milwaukee looked really good. Slowed down a little bit. Detroit looked really good. Neither of those teams in the Central divisions had a lot of competition for most of the year. It's getting a little bit closer, but I think it's a little too late. Seattle looking really good. They're surging at the right time. What does that mean at this point of the year? Surging at the right time. Still got the Astros right there. We were talking about it a couple months ago, where with all the crazy stuff that's happened with Seattle, with this generational pitching rotation, with this generational season by Cal Raleigh, still they're looking up at the Astros. And I just feel so bad for Seattle fans previously, but now they finally hopefully have that closure of being like, we're no longer looking up at someone. We're going to win this American League West. Finally, we're going to maybe get a bye. It's unlikely, depending how far back Detroit falls. I do still think that 1 and 2 will be Toronto number 1, Detroit number 2. I think Seattle surged just like a hair too late, like a millimeter too late. But still a great opportunity for the Seattle Mariners, even though they have to play an extra series, to finally get to the World Series. The only team that has never played in a World Series. So we wish the best for Seattle and hope that they can win it. And just in honor of how great they have been over the last week, they're the number 1 team in Dugout Debrief's power rankings. Moving on to the series of the week. So we got a couple weekend series, and we have an absolutely amazing weekday series as well. We have the Mariners at the Astros. There's a half a game separating these two guys here. The Mariners are on a 10-0 streak, while the Astros have been taking a step back at 6-4, losing Yordan Alvarez as well. Pitching rotation not looking great. The Rangers have a winnable series with the Marlins. If the Mariners can sweep, they can basically all but knock out Houston completely. It would not surprise me if the Houston Astros are knocked out of the playoffs completely. I previously said that the Rangers were going to be the odd team out, and we'll see if that ages. I'll still stick by that, but it would not surprise me if Houston, especially with losing superstar Yordan Alvarez, is the team out. Regardless of who's the team out, who's the team in the playoffs, who's the team winning the division, this series will determine the division. Mariners at Astros. The Mariners have been scorching hot, and I would love to see the Mariners continue to stay scorching hot and get that division. Our second series of the week is the Phillies at the Diamondbacks. And the Philadelphia Phillies, like we said before, just clinched the National League East, and they're still very much in contention for the number 1 seed over Milwaukee. They're getting a bye regardless at this point due to the Dodgers' aforementioned poor performance against them and just of late. The Diamondbacks have this brutal schedule, despite being right in the wild card race there with the Phillies, Dodgers, and Padres to wrap up the year. I don't think I could pick a worse schedule. If I was a National League West team, you're done with Colorado. You're done with if you're talking about an East, usually they have like a random East series there. You're done with the Marlins. You're done with the Nationals. Dodgers, Padres, man, that is brutal. You could have Colorado. You could have Miami, or Washington, but Phillies, Dodgers, Padres. Arizona, if they could somehow, win this series, they'll still be in the driver's seat, especially because Cincinnati has a lot to play up to as well. So, it's rough in general. It's rough in general for all of them. And then finally, we have the weekday series, but we have 3 of them, like we said, full slate. Red Sox at Blue Jays. The Red Sox are sliding slightly, not at a great time. The Red Sox are very comfortably in a wild card spot, probably way too far behind to get that division. It is beyond catching at this point. If anyone's going to catch them, it's New York. I still just don't like the vibes for either New York team, especially the Mets, but also the Yankees. The Guardians could catch up in this wild card race if they can beat Minnesota. They're playing the Twins at the same time that Boston and Toronto are playing each other. So Cleveland could catch up against Minnesota for that wild card. And then most importantly, the Blue Jays are all but a wrap for the American League East. So Boston, could pass New York for a wild card spot, kind of puddle jump them, see what they can do. They would love to do that, obviously. So again, if you have any other series of the week, make sure to put them in the comments down below. And we have our trivia question, and we're going to wrap up today's program here, ladies and gentlemen. So last week, which team has the fewest playoff appearances? And it is the Miami/Florida Marlins with 4. They have 4 playoff appearances. All were wild cards. 97 won the World Series. 2003 won the World Series. 2020 lost. 2023 lost. And I want to give a bonus fun fact here too, is the Miami Marlins up until 2020, both times they had made the playoffs in their entire existence, they won the World Series. They had a 100% success rate in the World Series based on their playoff appearances until 2020, which, one, that says a lot about the Miami Marlins because that's the most Marlins stat you can say. And then 2, that says a lot about the 2020 season. And this is coming from a Dodger fan who definitely thinks that our World Series championship does count just as much as our 2024 one does. But with that being said, this week's trivia question is, who is the Phillies' all-time hits leader? I feel like we spent a lot of time talking about the Philadelphia Phillies this week. And that's kind of why I threw that in. Who is the Phillies' all-time hits leader? And yeah, we talked a lot about the Phillies. We talked a lot about the Mets, and we're going to be, continuing to talk about all these teams just as it gets closer and closer. It's going to get narrower and narrower, our discussion. The offseason is when we're going to be talking about more struggling teams. We're going to be talking about teams like the A's, who, in my opinion, are the best, not good team of 2025. I'm going to probably dedicate a whole episode to the Oak Sacramento A's. That being said, guys, I'm Chris Deluca. I'm about to get out of here. I just want to make sure that you guys like and subscribe to Boom Broadcasting, this great channel. We have baseball, we have football, we have basketball, we have college basketball. We have a little bit of everything here. We have pro wrestling, movies, entertainment, a lot of stuff going on here. I was on Sideline Savants here this past Wednesday with Jason. We talked about a lot of different things. Tight end you really need to pick up. This is a guy I'm really big on. I talked about Vaughn Achan, who really helped me out this week, got me a lot of points. I talked about Jahmyr Gibbs, who helped me out a lot. I talked about a quarterback you should start. I talked about a quarterback you should not start. So make sure you watch that because, like I always say, I'm a much less talented Chris Rose because I do baseball and football. With that being said, Gridiron Address, 7:45 every single Sunday after the 4 o'clock games. You can see me there too. But again, guys, I want to thank you for tuning into Dugout Debrief this week, and I will see you next week. The Race Talktober continues.